Hello everyone, Christina Werner here. Welcome to another video. This is the card that almost never came to be. While making this card with my members here on YouTube, it took a steep turn and I almost gave up, but they encouraged me to keep going, and I'm going to show you what happened. So I'm starting out with the Interlocking Leaves Cling Background Stamp from Simon Says Stamp. This is a stamp that I designed a while back, and I'm using the Nature Colors set of pigment real brush markers from Caron. So I'd never used this particular set before, so I swatched the colors before I started. You can see how they're fairly opaque. They're not super opaque. I think you can layer them up and make them very opaque. So I'm using the color Wheat ink from Concord and Ninth to stamp the Interlocking Leaves background stamp onto some craft cardstock. The cardstock is cut to 6x6 since the stamp is 6x6, and I thought I would just leave it in my MISTI so that after I finish coloring all these leaves, I can stamp the same design on top again and do some white embossing. Now, someone in my premium membership here at YouTube, when I was creating this live, they said, well, why can't you just do the embossing from the start? Like, why couldn't I have done my gold embossing before I started coloring? And the reason I couldn't do that is because, as you can see, this acrylic paint pen, as I start coloring, it goes completely over the stamped lines. And that's what would happen with the embossed lines as well. So I knew that in advance. So I thought, you know what, I'll just leave the stamp in the door of my MISTI, and then I can just stamp over the exact same spot and it won't be any big deal. So I started coloring all these leaves using just those Nature Colors, and I didn't have them split down the middle of the leaf, but then it was looking a little bit too plain, so I decided to use like a light version on one half of the leaf and a dark version on the other. So once I did that, then I started to see it really take form, and it was taking a long time to color, so I've decided on the size of the pattern that I was going to be using, and then I've traced a little bit of a pencil line around so I knew how much to color. Then I also couldn't find a lighter shade of the teal in the Caron Real Brush pigment markers that I liked, so I happened to have some Graby acrylic paint pens. I bought a bunch a while back, and I thought, you know what, there might be a color in that set, and there was. I really loved how adding in that lighter teal shade really set off this card design, and I think it looks really good. So after everything was done and being colored, I used my heat tool just to speed along the drying process, since these do stay a little bit wet for a while. And here you can see that the Graby marker has a little bit of a sheen to it, whereas the Caron pigment real brush markers are very matte. But other than that, they perform very similarly. Okay, so then I went to stamp my background stamp directly onto my pattern here that I've colored. And this is when things took a steep turn. I even double checked to make sure my stamp was in the right direction, and then turns out it was upside down. So when I stamped, it did not line up with what I had done previously. Now I almost gave up, but then decided, you know what, let's just at least go ahead and do the gold embossing pattern. Let's just see if what I'd hoped would work would have worked. So I went ahead and applied the gilded embossing pattern from Burtis Monroe, and I hit that with my heat tool. And then I thought, well, it's going to work, so maybe I'll just start over. And all of my members in the chat, or everyone who was piping up in the chat, said, it looks really cool, keep going. So I decided, you know what, why not? Because I was going to have to turn off the camera and just redo it on my own anyway. So I thought, you know what, let's just take this to the end and see what happens. So I put it back into my MISTI, and I lined it up again to try to get it in the right area, and then I stamped again. So it's still not lining up perfectly. I don't entirely know what happened, but you know what? In the end, it kind of looked like I did it on purpose. So I'm just going to run with that. Oh yeah, I totally meant to stamp this multiple times. Yep, I tried to do that. Y'all, it was an accident. I did not mean to do it this way. I was hoping for a very clean, simple card design, but it just kind of morphed. So after I had that double stamped line, I thought, you know what, let's lean into it. Let's lean into that kind of offset, very irregular look. and I'm going to add some paint splatter. Before I did that, I cut it out just to, trim it down, see what I was working with. So I used the A2 Layers dies from Waffle Flower to do that. And then I went straight into the paint splatter that I just mentioned. Now I'm going to use my favorite gold paint for this, and it happens to match the gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe very well. This is the color Star from Yuli Watercolors. And I like to do my paint splatter from the edge of an acrylic block. And I had someone ask me on YouTube recently why I do this. Why not just tap a brush to get the paint splatter? And I find that I have a lot more control over where the paint splatter goes when I do it from this acrylic block. If you notice, the paint splatter doesn't really veer out much more than just the area immediately around my project. And I find that that's because going from an acrylic block, or you can even use a piece of cardstock, it just has a lot more control. So now I'm using the Just a Note dies from CZ Design and Simon Says Stamp. And I cut the words out of some matte gold cardstock and the shadow layer from white. Then I adhered them together using some Honeybee precision glue. I did consider doing the opposite with a gold shadow and a white word. So I did do that, but then in the end decided to go with the white shadow and gold word. I put some foam adhesive on the back of my colored panel, some nice thick 1-inch wide foam adhesive, and then put that directly onto a top folding A2 card front, just right there in the center. I'm then going to take my greeting that I've die cut, and I put some very thin strips of foam tape on the back, and then using tweezers, I just held that over the top of my project and then placed that kind of near the bottom in the center. To finish off this card, I used some embellishments from Craft Consortium. These are their gold pearl embellishments. I believe there's 3 or 4 different sizes of these half pearls that have adhesive on them. And I just adhered those to, kind of various places on the card. A nice little random placement for those embellishments. And here's the finished card. I'm really happy I continued on with this card even past the point where I made that mistake. I think it looked really, really cool. And I love this color palette for an autumn card. Thanks so much for joining me today. All of the supplies I used are linked down below in the video description, and I'll be back with another card video very soon. Come back and join me on Monday for my weekly live stream. I'll be back here at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I'll be creating live. I hope you'll join me. Thanks for watching.